In the cold glow of neon lights spilling across the rain-slick streets of Milan, everyone feared Alessandro De Luca, the millionaire mafia boss whose name alone could silence rooms and end wars, a man who trusted no one except the armored walls of his empire and the small, fragile hand of his daughter Sofia curled around his finger, because she was the only pure thing left in his world of blood and betrayal. And on that night, as he exited a private charity gala surrounded by guards, luxury cars, and shadows that whispered danger, Alessandro believed he had planned for everything, except her, the quiet woman named Elena who had been hired only weeks earlier as Sofia's caretaker, a woman with kind eyes, worn shoes, and a smile that felt out of place among guns and suits, yet somehow made Sofia laugh in ways Alessandro hadn't heard since his wife's death. The ambush came suddenly, a sharp crack slicing the air, chaos exploding as guards reached for weapons and guests screamed, and in that frozen second Alessandro saw the muzzle flash aimed not at him, but directly at Sofia, standing just a few steps away, her eyes wide and confused, and before his body or mind could react, Elena moved, not screaming, not hesitating, simply stepping forward and pulling Sofia down as the bullet tore into Elena's shoulder, the impact throwing her to the ground, blood staining her simple dress as Alessandro's men returned fire and the shooter vanished into the night, but Alessandro barely noticed the gunfight because all he could see was Elena lying there, teeth clenched in pain, one arm wrapped protectively around his daughter as if shielding her even in collapse, whispering softly, "It's okay, little star, don't be scared," and in that moment something cracked inside the men who had ordered deaths without blinking, because no one in his life had ever taken a bullet for him or his child without calculation or loyalty bought by money. The ambulance arrived, sirens wailing, and Alessandro rode with them, holding Sofia close while watching doctors work desperately on Elena, who drifted in and out of consciousness, murmuring apologies for bleeding on the floor, apologizing as if she had done something wrong, and when the doctor finally said she would live but might never fully regain strength in her arm, Alessandro felt a strange weight in his chest he didn't recognize as guilt or anger, but something heavier, gratitude mixed with awe. Days passed in the sterile quiet of a private hospital room guarded by armed men who looked almost ashamed to be there, and Alessandro visited every day, bringing flowers Elena insisted were too expensive, listening as Sofia told stories and drew pictures of Auntie Elena the Angel, a name that made Alessandro stiffen the first time he heard it, because he had grown up believing angels were fairy tales told to children to make the darkness easier to sleep with. Yet here was a woman who had stepped into darkness without armor, without power, and paid for it with her own blood. Elena never asked for money, never asked for protection or favors, only that Sofia be kept safe and kind, and one night, as rain tapped against the window, Alessandro finally asked her why she did it, why she moved in front of a bullet meant for a child who wasn't hers, and Elena looked at him with tired eyes and said softly, "Because someone once did the same for me, and I promised myself I'd be that person if I ever got the chance." Words so simple they struck Alessandro harder than any threat ever had, forcing him to confront a truth he had buried under wealth and violence, that despite all his power, he had built a world where innocence survived only by hiding behind people like Elena. Slowly, Alessandro changed, not overnight, not magically, but in small, dangerous ways, pulling back from bloodshed, dismantling parts of his empire that fed on fear, using his money to protect rather than dominate, because every time he considered returning to his old ways, he remembered Elena on the ground, bleeding yet smiling at his daughter, and the way Sofia slept more peacefully when Elena sat nearby, her presence warmer than any armed guard. Months later, when Elena finally left the hospital, her arm scarred, her strength limited, Alessandro offered her anything, money, houses, a new life, but she shook her head and said she already had what she needed, pointing to Sofia, and in that moment Alessandro understood that angels don't descend with wings and light, they walk quietly among us, unnoticed, until they choose to step in front of the bullet meant for what matters most. And as he watched Elena and Sofia walk ahead of him into the sunlight, Alessandro De Luca, the man the underworld feared, bowed his head not to a rival or a king, but to a woman who reminded him what humanity looked like, silently vowing that his daughter would grow up in a world shaped more by sacrifice than by fear. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you that even in the darkest places there can be light, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because every subscription helps us bring more powerful, emotional stories like this to life, stories that stay with you long after the screen fades to black.